While working on a music video version of a song I wrote a long time ago, I realized it was taking too long to do that. So I'm using the time lapses from some of the artworks I'm working on for that to instead create this time-lapse YouTube video of a few dragon artworks, which also fits in for the Smallest art challenge. So I'm working on a painting here where I looked at a reference photo from a public domain site, I believe it was Pexels, of a very beautiful sunset with a kissing couple silhouetted on the beach. When I recreated this background, it was mostly based on that photo, but I did change it up. I also completely took out the silhouetted couple. After I'd finished painting the background, I added in a dragon. I looked at different reference of an animal called a ribbon eel, which I used to help design the body plan and basic look of the dragon. I also used reference of bat wings to help me design the wings on this dragon creature better. As you can see, I decided 2 moons would be good for this alien world, and I decided I wanted a lot of transparency in certain elements like the fins and wing membranes. I created the wing on its own layer and duplicated and warped it to save time and make the far wing look almost identical, but change the angle. I did that same technique for the second set of wings I decided to add on this long-bodied creature. I decided this was a creature that lives in the water but also flies above it, but is not really adapted to move around on land, so it's more of a water and sky creature. Here you can see I used a layer on top to add adjusted lighting for the background. This next artwork was done by using a public domain image of a mountain as the idea for the background. I mostly copied that image idea, but I changed it up a lot. If you saw the original reference, which I didn't show here, but if you saw it, you'd realize how much I modified it. But I captured some of the key elements. The close-up, more yellowish, bright grass, the far away but still fairly dark and vivid mountain, the very vivid blue sky, and the dark trees. I made sure to put all these on separate layers. The sky was on its own layer behind the mountain, which was on its own layer. The far trees and dark greens were on its own layer. And the near grass was also on its own layer, above everything else. And when I paint the dragon in a minute, I paint the dragon entirely on layers underneath the foreground grass layer, so that the foreground grass overlaps it. To define things better, I put a layer between the grass and all the rest of the background, filled it in solid with a gray, and lowered the opacity, so that it would be easier for me to see my sketching and painting of the dragon without the background elements distracting me. This made it easier for me to focus on what I was actually drawing, while still not forgetting what those background elements are. This made it easier to position the 3-dimensional forms and composition of the dragon so it went with the background, rather than creating unpleasant tangents by ignoring the background altogether. I was inspired by an animation of a serpentine dragon I saw. Well, the animation involved one, but I didn't copy this dragon from that. Rather, I made a similar mammalian long-bodied dragon. I also wanted to paint a dragon that was very metallic gold. I wanted it to have a lot of 3-dimensional space and beautiful flowing composition. The challenge for this as well was to make it look scaled without painting every scale in, and to use layer modes and what I understood about them well. I used 2 layers for the shadows, one set to multiply and one set to a different setting. It ended up being color burn mode. I then erased and adjusted things. I also made a layer to adjust the different lighting colors on top by painting it with yellow and darker blue to adjust the values behind. I changed the opacities on these levels as I went along and adjusted for the final version. Here you see I removed that layer that went between the dragon and the background because now I'm getting near the end. That was the lighting adjustment. On a separate layer, I made the very brightest highlights. I also used a separate layer to paint some glows, which I was able to use Gaussian blur to spread out, and I can adjust the opacity of all these layers to get the final result I like. Using my original design from a photograph in my sketchbook, the idea is to highlight claws, tooth, and horn for a line in the upcoming dragon music video song that I'm creating now. So this whole picture had to emphasize claw, tooth, and horn. I ended up changing the view of the head completely, but I still used that claw or hand as a reference. I used many different layers in Procreate to accomplish my goals. I kept the line art on its own layer, and all the scale lines on their own layer underneath that, so I could alpha lock and use the layer modes very effectively and quickly in Procreate. I also used a scale brush I downloaded for the neck, erasing and modifying as needed, and painted in other scales completely by hand, getting different type of body scales in different parts of the body, like a real animal would have. I used color flatting and did the whole background on a layer behind everything else. You can vaguely see the lines here because the idea is to paint the background. On top of everything, I paint the glow in the mouth, and I also create another glow layer later that gets merged, which is just for the eye. I ended up animating some of the glow breath weapon in this, just so it was interesting to look at, though the final painting doesn't have the breath weapon breathing out. The emphasis is on claw, tooth, and horn because of the line in the song. The song is called Dragon Dragon, and will be coming out hopefully for my next YouTube video. It's in a language I made up, as well as English, and I hope people enjoy it. It's one of my oldest songs that I fully documented and still have all the words for, and was one of the very first songs I translated into the language I'm making up called Feli-Latean. In this case, I decided to keep the shadows high contrast. I created its own multiply layer. And I decided it would be fun to animate a couple of breath weapons in the video for visual interest. I hope you've enjoyed this video very much, because I enjoyed painting this dragon quite a bit. Hello Valilirios, please consider subscribing if you enjoy my videos, and if you do, click that notification bell for post notifications. I aim for a new video every Wednesday, but life can cause delays sometimes. Feel free to leave any questions, comments, constructive criticisms, and other comments in the comment section below, and please like the video if you liked it. And remember, imagination is endless.